Okay. All right. Hello, I'm Coach David. This is Coach Renato. We're here with Coach Ray and Riley. Perfect. So basically here we just want to give an introduction. We want to highlight Ray and what he's doing in his fencing club and what he's after. So let's start. So tell us about your club, how you got here, how long you've been here, what weapons you guys do.
So we started off in South Austin at Becker Elementary. It's a small elementary school in South Austin. Had carpet on the floor, which was actually not half bad, about a gym court size. And we were there for about 17 years. About 5 principals came and went. And then we finally got one that didn't want the fencing program to continue. We had a member that was familiar with this location, and I think table tennis used to work out of this facility, and then it was vacant for a while, so we ended up here in North Austin.
Yeah. For those that can't see kind of behind, it's quite big. I think there's like 12 strips, or how many strips are here?
So we've got 10 strips here. It's 6,000 square feet, and we're expanding another 3,000 square feet this way to put in 5 more strips.
Wow. And then we have an armory behind us.
Yep.
It's like
office,
a whole studio.
Armory. We built that up for COVID, believe it or not. We had a lot of plexiglass.
Okay.
COVID was an interesting time. But yeah, that kind of kept our bout committee and folks away from this facility so that they can come in and still work. But we're using it right now to run tournaments, and we've got our computer set up back here. So.
Did you do any training during COVID?
We did. We went remote. We built up some, and we've got a couple still over there in the corner, some targets on wheels, little arms on them, and we had a video camera set up. Pretty elaborate, because we had one at our house, and then we had one down in Corpus also, because sometimes we travel down to Corpus. So we'd video in from either location and set up a green screen in the background to try and simplify what they were seeing. And I felt some success with it. I mean, the club didn't grow, but the fencers that were able to kind of stick through that were actually able to continue their training, if you will.
Were you able to keep most of those people, or was it like a core that stayed, or how did that work?
During COVID?
Yeah.
So our membership just kind of gradually declined across COVID. We got a couple of new fencers during COVID, but nothing. I mean, overall, the membership just took a hit across that period.
It was hectic.
I'm sorry?
It was hectic, hard time, probably.
Yeah, but again, I've done this. This is my 3rd job, so it wasn't from it wasn't a financial impact for us personally.
Okay.
Because this isn't our primary job, if you will.
Got it. That actually brings me to the next question. What do you do, or what were you doing before you decided to get into fencing, like as a club owner, as a coach,
Well, so I've been doing this for about 40 plus years. So I started around 18 as a freshman at the University of Texas in town. And I was studying electrical engineering, and I had one 1-hour elective. And I'm scanning through the course notes, and I came across FEN and said, fencing. Oh, how cool is that? So I took that class. The next semester, I took 2 classes. The 3rd semester, I TA'd and started the fencing club.
Okay.
The 4th semester, Vinnie Bradford, our founder, showed up to get her master's in kinesiology at the University of Texas. By then, I was kind of already hooked, but that kind of set the hook a little bit.
This is 1 year.
That was across 2 years.
Oh, so 2 years.
Semesters.
Okay. Semesters, right.
First semester, second semester, and then the next year. 3rd semester, it was in the University of Texas football stadium is where we met. And so by the 4th semester, the 2nd year, Vinnie Bradford showed up to get her master's degree and started coaching at the club at the University of Texas. And we went from there.
Wow, it's quite a ways you've gone. You can see from this.
Yeah.
That's cool.
But we graduated in 1989 and founded the Texas Fencing Academy. So Vinny was our, we still have a couple of our original board members still active on the board. And so in 1989, we started a nonprofit, Texas Fencing Academy, with maybe 3 students, and Vinny is our coach.
Okay. All right. What were you fencing then, or what did you, would you ever compete as a fencer, or you went right to a coach?
No, so I was a competitive fencer in college.
Okay.
So back in the 80s, epee has always been big in Texas because the modern pentathlon is based out of San Antonio.
Okay.
And so there's always been a strong epee contingent. But I fenced competitive foil, and foil hasn't been as strong as epee in Texas. So me and Mike Hall would travel off to NACS and compete. And since we were there, I'd pick up epee because, we've got the cost of a plane ticket and just one event. No, I can do epee too.
Yeah.
So we'd warm up together and I'd support him with epee. So that's kind of how I got into a little bit of epee. But in college, I fenced competitive foil.
Right now, do you think in Texas or in United, we are specifically talking about Texas, what weapon is the strongest? What do you think about foil, epee, saber, if it's a really good level?
I think the sport in general has grown so much across the 4 decades that I've been a part of it. Epee is still very strong. We've got a couple of strong clubs down in Houston that really drive epee.
San Antonio as well.
San Antonio's got a couple of growing epee clubs. Houston, I think, has got a bigger squad, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So epee is still very strong in Texas. Saber, with Globus in particular, I think coming to Dallas, I think that's really increased the level of competitive saber in Texas. I think they're kind of a very strong hub for saber. And foil, between Houston and there's another club here in Austin that does foil, and Houston. I've seen kind of foil grow and ebb in strength at a national level, but epee, I think Texas competes very strong at a national level, and some saber, I think less so in foil.
Okay. Cool.
And you're doing epee. Right now, your priority is epee.
So right now, for about 15, 20 years, we taught all 3 weapons here in our club. And it's kind of a strong philosophy of mine at the time was I just wanted to teach the kids fencing. And there's some transfer of learning from one weapon to the other. I think a lot of clubs are founded by a very strong coach in a particular weapon. So that's what they do. They're able to focus all of their energy into one particular weapon because they were a former pentathlon or a former Olympian in that weapon. But from fencers coming in off the street and starting, they pretty much don't have a choice. It's like, well, we teach one weapon there. So you may have some strengths or attributes that might fit better in a different weapon, but hey, we only teach one weapon.
Right.
So make it work. So for the longest while, we taught all 3 weapons here. We picked up saber probably 15 years ago and started doing saber. It was the last weapon that we brought into our mix. But I liked teaching kids all 3 weapons, and it served them well. We have currently a fencer who went off to Brandeis, and they didn't want to fence in college, but they were sitting in a math class, and the person next to him fenced, was on the fencing team. They didn't go to Brandeis specifically for the fencing program, but she actually fenced all 3 weapons. And it turned out that Brandeis needed a foil fencer.
See.
They were weak in foil. So her strength is saber, but she knew foil because she was from that generation of fencers that we spent a lot of time teaching all three weapons. So she was able to go and be a part of Brandeis' team. This was last season, and help them out in foil. And I think she's won a spot on the saber squad now.
Nice.
So it's kind of-
Sadly,
it's kind of fun.
you're mistaking two fencers. You're talking about Tufts. Not
Oh,
Brandeis,
Tufts. There we go.
We had
There
another
go.
fencer
Yeah,
go off
yeah,
to
yeah.
Brandeis, but the
So we've
fencer
got
he
one
was
at
talking about was
Brandeis.
Tufts.
Oh, got it.
It's
Okay.
Tufts. Yeah, yeah.
So, okay, actually, that's a good question. So, what do you think about fencers who fence multiple weapons? Do you think it's a smart move? Do you think they should all in on one weapon? Depends on how old they are, what the goal is. What are your thoughts on this?
I think, again, I was pretty stubborn about it. I'm half German. When I get kind of set in particular direction, I don't really peel off that. So for about 15, 20 years, I taught all three weapons.
Yeah.
And believed very strongly that it was good for the fencers. Across that time, though, I've lost a lot of fencers that just wanted to specialize in a weapon.
Sure.
It's like, well, but we're doing multiple weapons here.
Yeah.
So it comes with its trade-offs. As a club and a program, when you have fencers that find a weapon that, they just want to focus on this particular weapon. And sometimes it's not just the fencers. Sometimes it's the parents of
Yeah.
the fencers. So they'll have decided that, this is what we want to do.
Yeah.
But currently, well, we teach epee and saber here at the Texas Fencing Academy. And we had to give up foil because we weren't quite big enough to sustain all three weapons.
Okay.
So we're currently doing epee and saber. And I have some fencers that I encourage, especially when they're first starting off. It's like, come to both sets of classes. Enjoy learning fencing. You might have some attributes that fit better in epee, and you might gravitate there. Likewise for saber. But until you've made that determination, or it used to be, I would say, hey, let's do all three weapons and continue and start competing in them. We can go off to a tournament as a Y10 fencer and fence in foil and epee and saber. And I didn't underestimate the kids' ability to switch between those weapons.
Okay.
And they were able to. They were good at it. As an adult coming in, I would say, I'll pick a weapon, right?
Right.
You're inflexible, and what do you like, saber or epee? Don't necessarily try. You can try both of them out for a couple of months or whatnot, but from a competitive developmental fencer's perspective, I like the notion of getting to go to tournaments, fencing in multiple weapons. It's like, okay, because in a way you're training the fencers. When you're holding an epee, you need to fence this way. When you're holding a saber, you need to fence this way. And can you do that? Can you switch between one and the other? Kids are pretty good at it. And once you're able to start doing something like that, then you're learning fencing. Then we can go off at maybe a national level. And when you start making it in top 32 in a particular weapon, start getting some national points, then you can focus. That was the philosophy back maybe as recent as 5-10 years ago. Currently, I leave it more to the fencers to kind of tell me whether they want to do both weapons or pick one.
You're getting a lot of answers before I ask the questions, which is really cool.
I have a question. Actually.
You can ask follow-up questions.
Yes.
To you, Riley, you're the son of Coach
I am.
Ray. How long do you do fencing? What is your favorite weapon? And also, how many weapons did you learn?
I started when I was 5 years old, when I could hold a weapon, basically. And I did all three for the period of 10 years, just about, before we stopped foil because we were so small. And I stuck with those two up until high school. And the high school that I ended up going to was very rigorous, a lot of homework, a lot of time spent doing schoolwork. And so when it came to fencing, was kind of spread too thin to do two weapons and a school at the same time. And so I chose to stick with epee. And for epee, I chose it because it was one of my better weapons. I had better results. I also liked it a lot more because of just the tactics for it. Where saber was very like speed or speed and being faster was very key. Epee, I really just ended up being able to work better on technique, score a lot of touches that were not didn't put me at such a disadvantage speed wise. I could get further away. I could do stop hits. I could do a lot of hand touches, stuff like that. Where saber, it was a little more tricky for me to pull those off.
Question to both of you, probably for people who don't know nothing about fencing. What is the reason why parents bring children to the fencing? Like there's, some information that it can help you to get to university. Did you use it somehow? Did it help you, or anything you can tell?
It helped me a little bit. Currently I just finished my freshman year in college. I'm going to Stevens Institute of Technology, New Jersey, and I love it there. And the fencing team is great. And primarily I went up there because of engineering. My major is computer engineering, and they had a fencing team, they still have a fencing team. It's Div 3, and I just liked having the opportunity to fence in college as well. To the parents who think that being in or fencing helps with universities, sometimes it's like any sport, in my opinion. But yeah, he has more specifics.
There is a correlation, I think, between fencing and colleges, where parents see fencing as a potential avenue to get a leg up in their application process, or if they're strong enough, maybe to make the team, get a scholarship. I guess what they don't quite realize is there's only so many slots, and there are only so many colleges fencing programs, and so every once in a while I get the impression that that the parents are looking for like a scholarship, a full ride at a college, and you essentially have to be on an Olympic team to get a full ride to a college, for it to be your driving ticket item. And so while I think there's a lot of parents interested in that when they come in the door, the reality of it, I think, is less so. I like to think that they have that they like what the sport brings to their kids. That you get. Fencing's kind of interesting. It's a martial art. There's a lot of sportsmanship involved with it. There's a lot of protocols, if you will, saluting, handshaking after every match. And so that discipline, I think, attracts the parents for their children. The children that I get in this room, the most common trait that I would associate with them is how smart they are.
Yeah, I agree.
They're not always God's gift to athleticism, but they are almost always brilliant kids. Robotics or chess club or Eagle Scouts, or just accomplished in musical instruments and art and so forth. And so they've got a lot of activities, but they're just smart. And we see that play out at the college level also, that both my kids have gone off to college. My daughter just graduated from UNC, but one of the interesting, when we went toward the campus and they started showing us the fencing facility and so forth, they have a plaque, a trophy that is scholastically which sports teams have the highest GPAs. So they've run this across the last 20 years or so. And fencing shows up there quite a bit.
I'm not surprised.
So this room attracts smart kids, and they're fun to be around. And the parents of smart kids are fun to be around too. So
Yeah,
it's pretty interesting.
for those of you that can't see, we have the club here out in front of us, and there's flags hanging here from different universities. And some notable ones you'll see like Brown and Stanford, which, shows or goes to show what you were saying about the bright kids. Okay, cool.
So we fence as a family. My kids have gone off to university and fence. My brother's kids fence with us. They went to Duke and Temple.
Yeah.
They're actually
so
the Duke.
they're
Oh,
the two
yeah.
Duke and Temple flags that are out here. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Now, okay, so on the topic of college, because I do know that it is a big driver for a lot of the kids or the parents, right? And that all being said, how does that relate, do you think, across other sports, soccer, basketball, football? Even though there's only so many slots, from a ratio comparison, is it still better odds in your baseballs and stuff like that, or is it on about the same?
I don't have the raw numbers, but the research that I've read, the articles that I've read, put fencing up high on that list because of the ratio.
Right.
When you look at how large fencing as a sport is and how many people are in fencing, and compare it to, I would think, almost any other sport, volleyball or soccer or something like that, those sports are huge in comparison. And so for somebody in volleyball to be looking at getting a volleyball scholarship versus a fencer getting a fencer scholarship, I think the fencing avenue has a higher probability.
Yeah, and I also think you mentioned that not every kid that comes in here might be the most athletic, but they're bright, right? This also gives them an opportunity, or if they're not huge or just genetically gifted, and to play football or something like that, this allows like another opportunity for them.
Exactly,
So,
and again, sometimes they blossom and just turn into athletes.
Yeah.
I mean, right before your eyes. We start our kids as young. We have a little minnow program on Saturdays. We'll start kids as young as 5 and 6.
Yeah.
A lot can happen in 12 years before we send them off to college.
What's really nice is when you look at a group of fencers, you can't just pinpoint like those are epee fencers or those are saber fencers because of just the different ranges, sizes of height, right? Because of the skill. There are so many different things that a 6'2" person can do versus a 5'2" person.
Yeah.
But in fencing, there are the pros and cons of everything. Where you can probably look at a group of people and think, okay, maybe they play football, or maybe
Or
they
swimmers.
play,
That looks like a swimmer's
Exactly.
neck.
That's a good one, right? Where fencing, it's like you don't know. Like that person, you could be pointing at is an epee fencer because they're 6'2", but they could be just a really, really tall saber fencer or foil fencer, stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, okay. Do you think that? Let me say it like this: whenever you get a new student in, right? Let's say 3 months or less, and do you think that they understand how competitive fencing can be, or do you think they have a pretty good idea of coming from another sport? Do you think the average fencer is more competitive than the average, let's say, basketball player, or do you think from the beginning it's just much more competitive or more relaxed, or how would you relate any of them like that?
So we've
pinpoint.
Yeah, I mean, I've had the pleasure of fencing for 40 years and coaching for 30. And across those 30 years, I've gotten very competitive fencers from day one. I mean, they'll walk in and when can I start heading off to tournaments? And maybe they came from another sport. I have a couple right now that they've probably been fencing for less than 3 months, but they did, I think it was judo before. So they're very focused, they're very competitive. And you can see that they're trainable, that you can kind of just point something out to them and they think about it and they try and go off and execute it. And then on the other side, I have kids that come in that just like sword fighting. They picked up a stick out in the backyard and mom and dad said, hey, maybe there's a fence. And usually what happens is the kids have to bug their parents for about 2 to 3 years before the parents will actually Google search and say, oh, there is fencing.
So we'll where people know what football is, fencing.
Yeah,
You have to look it up.
We
sometimes.
get them wandering in. It's like, oh, didn't know that there was fencing, and the kid has wanted to do it for 2 or 3 years, but they're out there having fun like they're supposed to.
Right.
Another day, somebody asked me, "What are you doing?" I said, "Fencing." Oh, you like put fences, right?
Exactly. Yeah,
No.
barbed wire or picket
Yeah.
fence.
Or the phone call, I'm looking for, this kind of wood fence. How much does it cost for
Yes.
I'm like, nah, wrong number. Yeah.
I've gotten that once or twice.
Yeah. Okay. So let me ask this question. So let's say you have 2 fencers. One, they're just starting out. They're, they maybe less like in a few months, and then you have people who are actively going to tournaments, right? First question, how many days a week should they practice? And second question, how long is that practice for these 2 different fencers? Yeah.
So for a recreational fencer, 2 or 3 times a week is plenty. But again, we get a lot of our kids that are so very active in other things, and sometimes it's hard for them to actually come as often as they want to.
Right.
But so recreationally, once, twice a week could work. What we try and set up here is we're fencing. We're here 5 days a week, but we spread that across 2 weapons. So Monday, Wednesday we do saber. Tuesday, Thursday we do epee. But after the class, it's open fencing, and either weapon could fence.
Okay.
So if you're an epee fencer, you could come on those saber nights. The class is going to be taught as epee from 6 to 7, but from 7 on,
Right.
whoever wanted to come. Now that competitive fencer, you probably can't come too much.
Right.
And you can't come for too many hours.
You can't overtrain.
Well, I mean, technically that is a thing, but I've sometimes asked. I get curious about that same question myself.
Yeah.
It's like, are my competitive fencers actually training the equivalent of what other clubs are doing? So at NACS, I'll go out and I'll ask a couple of other fencers. I say, oh, how often are you coming to fencing, and so forth. Usually the ones that just kick my fencer's butt, and I'm trying to get a little bit of information to soften that blow. Well, I mean, frequently it turns out they're homeschooled, they're going to fencing 7 days a week.
Yeah, lessons as well every day. One-on-ones.
So, and that can start getting expensive too when you start factoring in the one-on-one lessons.
Yeah.
So we're trying to find a balance here where you can get enough fencing in, but if you really want to stay super competitive, you're going to have to travel off to tournaments. You're going to have to get video. We're going to have to review video. We're going to have to target some of our training and drilling specific to what's happening for you. Instead of, I mean, I think some clubs approach it from the perspective of, well, you can't get too many one-on-one lessons. That starts getting a little pricey.
It gets pricey, and I think that it depends on the fencer. There's a mental and physical kind of break and absorbment of what just happened. Like you have to process,
Yep.
right?
Fencers learn different ways. Some like motor control. If you can kind of show them what they should be doing, they can pick that up. We get some verbal fencers where just describing it, and it's like, oh wow, I only had to say that twice, and they're actually doing it. Or maybe you got to show it. You got to show it to them. So they can learn in a lot of different ways. But
do you see, like, because I'll tell you, I see some of it where we're at. Let's say you have a new person, right? And maybe they're doing some other stuff before, but that sport practice was like an hour, right? Because they do it through school or whatever it is. And then, somebody walks in the door, okay, I need you here 4 days a week, minimum. I need you here 3 hours a day. It's like a little bit too much, too soon. I don't know. But do you see you guys have an issue with that, or is it pretty much people are okay with that right away? Or
well, so for about 25 of those years, we just did this in the evenings.
Okay.
I mean, we're a not-for-profit organization, and the coaches all had day jobs.
Right.
So we weren't opening up in the morning and doing this from 9 until 9 type thing. Recently, I've retired, so I can focus a little bit more energy on the club, and we can expand our hours and time. So I guess in past years, past decades maybe, when we were a little more competitive than we are currently. And as a club, our competitiveness kind of ebbs and flows too. It's like sometimes we have really strong fencers, and sometimes we're a big recreational club that our fencers are getting their foundation underneath them. So
We've had nights where we run the 6 to 7 class is recreational. We've had nights where the room's filled 6 to 7, and then as soon as like 7 hits, half leaves.
it's like
Yeah,
90% of them go.
Yeah.
It's like, and
Yeah,
some of those we're trying to bring into the competitive framework. But so we also started offering a 5 to 6 competitive fencing class.
That's okay.
Okay. So now you can come at 5, do 5 to 6, just competitive fencer, stick around 6 to 7, do the class, stay after, do free fencing, 7 to 8:30 type thing. But our fencers don't quite realize that they were supposed to do those 3 things. So sometimes they just come to the competitive class and then they go home and it's like, that wasn't quite the intent. It really depends on how strong of a competitor you want to be.
Sometimes it's the parents too. Sometimes timing especially for the younger kids and those who can't like drive themselves. Parents in work at 5, maybe even further. They come here late, possibly.
Sure.
Some parents have to go back because they have a 9 a.m. thing. They can't be staying out until wherever.
Or it's you pick up little Timmy from school, you come here for the competitive class. Wait, I got to get groceries.
Yeah.
I'll bring you back for open fencing,
Yeah.
something like that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we have a few that'll just drop their kid off and say, hey, hang out here for the next 2.5, 3 hours.
And
Coach, work them.
Those fencers, at least in my experience, have found it fun to stay over and fence. And when their parents maybe show up a little early or something, they don't immediately want to
Right.
scoot out the door, right? They want to keep fencing. They want to do a couple more bouts, which is great because I love seeing that competitiveness and I love seeing that like training
Sure.
for kids.
Yeah.
It's great.
Also, it's like a community in United States more, so people get friends. Yeah,
Yep,
it's
exactly.
fun.
And that's, I mean, for my kids in particular, that's what I told them. It's like, you can go to out-of-state college, but you have to be on a fencing team. And I think one of my former coaches, coaches college, etc., Abdel Salim, he pointed out that no matter which city you go to, if you just walk into a fencing club, you pretty much have a community. And so that was kind of big for me, especially for my kids, sending them off to college. It's like, okay, I'll send you out of state. You go do your thing, but I know that you have a club and a team that you're a part of.
Yeah.
So that was big for us.
For me, back all the way up in New Jersey, right? As soon as I got there, before I kind of met the fencing team, I didn't feel like an outcast at all, but it was some things were like, oh, that's a little different, right? And then fencing was just kind of that thing that I felt that we had connected. That I know saber, I know foil, I know what this looks like, right? And I know the fencers, and talking to them, and we find like common interests. And I've had great experiences with that. It's been very nice.
Okay, so I have a question for both of you. All right, so why do you decide, okay, this is what I want to do, like as another career, life, hobby? It's a lifestyle, right? So I know when you did it, but why I'm not too clear on. And what was it like growing up with a coach or a dad?
Well, to answer that,
I'll let him answer the.
so, like I said earlier, I started when I was 5, more or less, even if I didn't want to. Mostly because of Coach being my dad.
He was an interesting 5-year-old as a fencer. Yes.
I had some issues, mostly when it came to just like paying attention. Lo and behold, my junior year of high school, I go get tested for ADHD, and apparently I have it. So that could have been part of it, right? But
what I remembered was coming here and just spending time with people who had a similar interest. And at first, maybe I didn't have that interest at the same thing. But I was coming here, and I would fence, and then like recreational class, and then this was way before I did tournaments. And then I might stop fencing, just watch, right? And I fell in love with just watching the sport and being a part of it, right? Just kind of just how it is. Where football, you have this big open field, and it's kind of hard, at least for me, even watching it on television. I don't know, 9 times out of 10 what's going on. Sure. Same thing with baseball, same thing with basketball. That's mostly because I've spent almost 15 years in one sport. But I just...
Every once in a while, they'll ask an interesting question about another sport, and I'll just shake
What was my most
head.
recent one? It was how many innings there are in
No.
baseball or something?
I think it was a home run. How many points?
yeah.
How many points a home run got
Three.
you?
I asked if it was 3 points or home run, and that was
As a fencing coach, I know that I've succeeded when they ask questions like that.
But after a while, I felt used to it. I felt waking up, going to school, and then coming to practice was just something I loved. I fell in love with it, and sometimes it was tough. Starting high school was a little tough, where it was like, I want to be here and I want to be spending time, but I also have so much work, and that's why I had to kind of stop and go to one weapon. And from there, I was able to keep school up here and fencing. School came first, and then fencing was a very close second.
How often were you practicing at that time? Was it still like every day, or did it drop?
It dropped to you for a while. For like, okay, freshman year we got cut in half because of COVID. Sophomore year was online, and so my junior and senior year were the most important. And at that point in time, I had just chosen FA. So I was coming junior year probably Tuesdays and Thursdays and Saturdays, so 3 times a week.
Okay.
I'd get here. School ended 3:55. I'd be here at like 4:20ish. My high school was like right down the road or something.
So for most of the 13, 14 years that he's fenced, obviously not when he was 5, but for most of that, he came when I came to fencing. Kids
Excuse me 1 second. My mom was calling.
The kids just came with me to fencing. And that was, it's like, it doesn't matter how your day has gone so far. We have a constant in our life, and it's fencing. You can have an awful day at school, and it doesn't really matter. We're just going to go to fencing now.
The philosophy.
And it's going to get better. I will say, though, as a parent coach of my two kids fencing, it's an interesting journey. Less so with my daughter, but Riley actually challenged my love of the sport. There were nights where this young man and I were standing outside of the room having discussions instead of me getting to be inside of the room coaching, which is what I love to do. But we got through those years. And for me in particular, I guess I fell in love with it as a freshman at college. It may have impacted my GPA slightly in college because I was just doing fencing pretty much every night that I could. And then, as I say, 2 years into it, Vinnie Bradford, 2-time Olympian, shows up, my future coach and founder of TFA, still on our board of directors. So we had a fun time with that. So as a fencer, personally, the sport itself initially attracted me. As a coach, it's the kids.
Yeah.
The kids that find fencing, and it's not a huge sport. So there's already a self-selecting group of kids. And as I say, they're usually smart. They're a lot of fun to be around. I think it was the other night, Max pointed out to me that Campbell's, they wanted a water break. And I said, no, you need to be like Campbell's. And where's your hunchback? And it's like, like Max is pointing out to me, oh, you know, coach, I mean, camels don't actually have water in their humps. It's like, it's fatty tissue. The kid's all of what, 9? It's like, okay, I'm going to give you that one.
I thought it was milk. Just kidding. All right.
So yes, he did not get push-ups for that. Usually when they suggest that coach is wrong, they get push-ups.
It's an interesting reward.
Exactly. It's always a reward.
Yeah. Well, okay, so looking back, as a fencer, as a coach, is there anything you would have done differently?
Fencer and a coach that I would do differently. I don't know. We've had a lot of fencers come and go, and I don't know. You're trying to be all things to all fencers. Some of them want to do this, some of them want to do that. But I do it differently if I had to do it over. I like to think that we're continuously learning and evolving our program and what we have to offer. So I don't necessarily look backwards and say, oh, I wish we had
Sure.
done this. And it's always kind of looking forward on, okay, this is where we're at and this is where we want to go.
Cool. Cool. All right. Do you have any future plans for the sport?
So again, recently retired, so I get to spend more time with it. For the longest while here, we've been at this location for 15 years. It was month to month. A little stressful when you're month to month and you're putting this infrastructure in place.
Oh, you mean here? Like this is month?
This was
Oh,
month to
it
was.
month.
It was.
Oh, was.
Now
15
we have
years. So
Wow.
recently we were able to get a 5-year lease.
Okay.
And so that's been kind of a burden off our shoulders. So our plans are specifically we're at 6,000 square feet here. We have an additional 3,000 square feet that's unfinished right next to us here that we're going to work on and expand our club into. So
Okay.
we'll end up with a 9,000 square foot facility. We'll get to continue this fun endeavor.
How long do you plan to do this? Forever?
You know, is my wife going to see this?
Anyone can see this. Anyone can see it. What's her name?
My wife's name is Diane.
Diane, skip forward about 2 minutes.
Yeah. We went off to, so to answer your question, I don't see stopping doing this. We went off to the 2000 Sydney Olympics, and when we got there, I looked over at my wife and I said, "Sweetheart, I had no idea there were other sports other than fencing. All I had was fencing." So this year we are going to the Paris Olympics, but she's wizened up to the fact that there are other sports. It's like, oh darn, I can't just live in the fencing room.
Yep.
Um,
Do you think it's okay? So, do you think it's, how can I say this? Is it like a life's calling, or is it like a sense of duty, or is it just it's all you've known? Why? I mean, normally when you hear forever, as long as I can go, there's something else kind of behind it, right? Like a lot of people look forward to retirement, and then travel or
I'm
pension or
retired.
whatever it is, right? Yeah, I know, but yeah, I know, but this is a separate thing.
So as I say, this for 40 years or so, this was the third job,
Okay.
if you will. Something we got to do in the evenings. And you could compartmentalize and say, okay, I got to leave work because I got to go to fencing. Now, when I got done with fencing, I might have to log back on and do work again. But there was this nice window break. What were my choices again? Calling, duty.
Yeah, responsible, whatever it is,
I love the sport. I love the people that it brings into this room. I love the community that we're able to build as a club. The families. When we go, we recently ran a tournament, and it's all the volunteers that are showing up to help out. So I guess it's the people. More in particular, it's the kids. We'll run a new fencer day once a month. Really look forward to seeing who's going to walk in that door. So calling? I don't know. Definitely passionate about it.
Okay.
Stubborn. I've been accused
There
of
you
being
go.
stubborn
There you
in
go.
years past.
A little bit, maybe just a tad. Yeah.
Is being a coach in your future?
Yes,
Okay.
most definitely.
That makes sense. That's good. That's good. Okay. Let's see here. Is there any other advice that you have for any new fencers that we haven't gone over yet, or somebody who's thinking about trying out fencing, or a parent out there, or anything like that?
Come enjoy learning fencing. I think it's a neat group of people. We get to do fencing. And however deep you want to take that competitively or just recreationally, you can go as far as you want. But it is a nice small community that attracts pretty neat people.
Yeah.
So,
I would agree. Do you have any personal philosophies you developed based off the sport?
I don't know that I think of any philosophies in general.
Okay.
Crush, maim, and destroy. No.
That's a good one.
That was our that is a motto that we use.
All right. Do you have like a most memorable moment or moments? Maybe it was a camp. Maybe it was some knack. Maybe it was a
Olympics.
practice night. Yeah, something.
What was your?
In the Olympics.
Oh, yeah, watching the Olympics. Okay, we're gonna have to circle back on that one. I gotta think about that one for a little
What
bit.
are you, Riley?
I've had a couple. This past year, when I would go up to college meets, I had times where I'd look across to the other person and think, wow, it's going to be a tough one. I'm fencing, and then the bout's close. And then I managed to pull off probably the most beautiful touch, other than a beautiful hand pick that was just set up great. Drop my hand just a little bit. They raise it just enough, and I poke them right in the feet. Right in the
Epee.
pinky. Exactly.
Okay, Epe. I just want to clarify. Epe.
Sorry, yes, I'm an Epee fencer.
It wasn't off target with foil. It was Epe. It was Epe.
And then there was a moment where just the people I fenced, I never really knew kind of until maybe last year. Just I have fenced people that have been on the junior team,
Okay.
or still are, or are on the junior world team for the USA. I've been those fencers sometimes.
Sure. Yeah.
Sometimes I got my butt handed to me, but it was nice to see. Just they're really good fencers, but at a point in time, I was able to beat them, and that was a real confidence booster. Where it's like sometimes I have really good days in the sport, and some days I do the wackiest thing and I just get hit, and I'm wondering, why?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because, obviously there's fencers that just stand out, top among everyone, but it's not something where it's so consistent to where the same person is winning the same like gold medal every time. Usually, there's some exceptions for sure, but normally you'll say, well, everyone in top whatever can pretty much who's ever having a better day, so that's cool. That's really good to see.
It's the same thing where you have number one getting knocked out by like 200
Sure.
or something. Everyone
Yeah.
has their days.
Yeah. Happens.
I guess for me, some of the more memorable moments are getting to coach kids and having it work,
Okay.
having a positive outcome for them, and seeing their success. Those are probably the most fun moments. Figuring something out, offering it to your fencer, and having them be able to go execute.
What about from an achievement standpoint?
Achievement. Again, it's been fun across the years sending kids off to NCAA programs that you could look at as an achievement. We've had national champions in years past. You could look at that as an achievement, but just seeing the kids grow from wherever they are in the sport. In the early years, let's say, being able to make a positive impact for those kids.
Yeah.
They may go off and fence for other clubs or go off to college and have other successes, but for some period, you could look at that accomplishment and say, hey, we accomplished that together.
Is there anything about the sport you would change? Or weapon? We can look at it as a sport or a weapon.
I think as a sport, I think the national organization is trying to address some of the wacky coach behavior at tournaments. We also try and get our fencers to develop into refs, and for them to have the confidence to stand out there and be the person making the calls. It's nice seeing kids grow into that aspect. But coaches, how the coaches interact with the refs, that could be better. Sometimes how the coaches interact with their students could be better. But again, there are a lot of different ways to accomplish it. But if I had to point to, hey, could I wave a wand and change X? It would probably be along those lines.
What about and you mentioned some of the rules that the U.S. fencing is trying to deal with. Is there anything you've seen in the past, let's say 3 years, 5 years, that they've handled really well? You think could have been handled better? Anything like that?
Well, again, it's early times. They tried to invoke reinterpretation of the coaching rule, strip coaching.
I remember.
And to try and address, I think, some of the issues that I'm talking about, they had to back off of that. I think just supporting the refs better as an organization, because they're that entity that actually makes tournaments possible, if you will, at many different levels. And so when you start trying to train those refs, and you start putting them into situations where they're being stretched in making calls and so forth, kind of taking care of them and nurturing them and kind of protecting them from these overbearing coaches. Saber is probably the most egregious weapon of the three.
No.
And it does get a little bit much when you go off to a national competition and your fencer's trying to do their thing, their fencer's trying to do their thing, and the ref's trying to do their thing too. And a Saber coach is inserting themselves into that framework. And I've seen that handled poorly. I think the national organization could do a more consistent job of that.
I would have to agree. We don't have to get too much in the weeds of this, but I remember this was a big topic, right? So there are pretty straightforward rules about how the coach, the referee, and the fencer interact with one another on the strip.
It's supposed to be fencer interacting with the ref, where the coach doesn't really have a role in that.
It's not a triangle.
The coaches will
We're
insert
missing
themselves.
part of the leg of a triangle.
And that's the
between
part
the
that
coach and ref.
There's always been like a kind of, I want to say, gentleman's agreement between everyone, unspoken rule where up to a limit, there's kind of like an understanding from what I've observed. But I do think that some people take it too far, for sure.
It becomes a screaming match where you have a coach just outright yelling at the director.
Well, it's just influence. They're trying to influence the outcome.
Sure.
It's a sport,
It's
right? We're not. I mean, in any other sport, when you have a coach yelling at a ref, right? There is some regard of like, why are they doing that?
Yep.
And in fencing, sometimes it just turns into like, oh, that ref must have made a bad call, right? And we're talking about refs so that there's a possibility that maybe they did. There's a higher possibility that they saw what they saw, and the coach is just yelling at them because they didn't give it to their fencing.
well, they're impacting the integrity of the game. are trying to influence an outcome. And that has to be done in a particular manner, I think.
Yeah.
That would be the one thing.
Okay, cool. Is there anyone you would like to recognize?
I think I still have to reach back to Vinnie Bradford, my coach of many, many years and current member of our board of directors. Her portrait is right back here up in the wall. She's a wonderful, wonderful person and still involved with the sport actively. She's part of the United States Fencing Coaches Association. That would be my shout out.
Glad you brought that up. This gives me another idea. So the U.S. Fencing Association, right? They also have like a coaching thing there. They've implemented, I think, this past year, right?
U.S. Fencing as well as the United States Fencing Coaches Association.
Yes. Is there? Do you see one like? Do you think they're two sides of the same coin? Do you think that one is going to grow more than the other? What do you think is going on with this?
Well, I think the USFCA, the United States Fencing Coaches Association, has the mandate to train coaches and certify coaches. And the U.S. Fencing organization branches into that space because they recognize that coaching is an integral component of their sport. So they offer coaching memberships and require safe sport training, and so forth. But the actual training and certification of fencing coaches should be left to the experts, and the experts in that field are USFCA.
The other coaches.
Well, it's the United States Fencing Coaches Association, so it's the coaching body. So they're working to develop training material. How do you train coaches?
Sure. All right. So I think this is one of our last questions. What are your life goals, this is for both of you, outside of fencing?
Outside of fencing? There's life outside of fencing?
There is. Well, for me, finishing up school,
Sure.
getting a degree
Yeah.
in computer engineering, and working. Besides that, having a good fencing career and also actual work career, where at some point in time I would like to have my first job. And
Are you trying to convince me? I'm all for that. I don't know.
No,
If you get your
he's
first
trained me
job,
well.
you're off my payroll. For me, life goals outside of fencing, that's a tough one.
I know, it's hard.
It's like all your life is fencing.
I've
70%.
been fencing 15 years of my life.
My life goal is fencing. So I think, hey, this is for you, Diane. We'd like to travel more. So we will be doing that a bit. And got to get one more kid through college. We've got our daughter is in her master's program. So we're close to closing out the college era. And we can focus a little bit more on some of the fun things that retirement will bring us.
Sure.
Travel being one of them.
I have a question. On the tournaments, I often see that you wear a hat. It's a purple hat with a fur. What is the symbol of that hat?
That hat is only worn at the Pirate Clash.
Oh, that makes sense.
That was the pirate hat. See, now at the Christmas tournament, we've got our elf hats.
Okay.
So it's a
Oh.
different hats every time.
Oh, that's actually pretty
That's
cool.
cool.
We're the elves, and
Yeah.
then
Whose idea was
my
that?
mom and my sister are there as well. They're Santa.
That's cool.
This class.
We are the workers. Whose idea was it? Oh, I don't know. I think I may get credit for elf years. For the pirate clash, we actually had the wardrobe from going to Texas Ren Fest.
Okay.
So we've gone off in many years, last 40 years also to the Texas Ren Fest. So we have different attires. We happen to have pirate hats and we were running the pirate clash. So it just worked out.
Makes complete sense. Yeah. All right. I think that's all the
Thank
questions
you.
I have. Yeah. Thanks for doing
pleasure.
this.
Yep, absolutely.
All right.
So if you're looking to fence in Austin, join Texas Fencing Academy and Coach Ray. And if you're looking to fence foil in DFW, please go to Louisville Go Fence Academy.
Do you guys have like a website you think you want to plug?
TexasFencingAcademy.org
Mhm.
is our website.
And same on Instagram and
And Facebook.
Facebook. Yes.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks, guys.
Our
I
pleasure.
appreciate your
Thank
time.
you so much.
Yep.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
I'm sure you'll edit that to brilliance.